In this episode, we will be discussing the Financial Action Task Force or FATF. Let's begin with a brief introduction. The Financial Action Task Force or FATF is the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. As the policy-making body, the FATF works to generate the necessary political will to bring about national legislative and regulatory reforms in these areas. It monitors countries to ensure implementation of the FATF standards fully and effectively. Now, focusing on a brief history on the formation of the FATF. The FATF was established in 1989 by a group of 7 summit in Paris. The G7 is an organization made up of the world's 7 largest advanced economies: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, and the United States. FATF's initial aim was only to examine and develop measures to combat money laundering. After the 9/11 terror attacks in the US in 2001, the FATF expanded its mandate to incorporate efforts to combat terrorist financing in addition to money laundering. In 2012, it added efforts to counter the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Now, let's discuss composition and participation of FATF. Looking at the members of FATF. FATF members are the jurisdictions and organizations that have agreed to work together in the form of a task force toward the common objectives laid out in this mandate. As of January 2021, FATF has 39 members, including 2 regional organizations, the European Commission and the Gulf Cooperation Council. Now, let's focus on associate members of FATF. Associate members are FATF-style regional bodies or FSRBs as designated by the FATF that participate in the work of the FATF. To achieve global implementation of the FATF recommendations, the FATF relies on FSRBs in addition to its own 39 members. The 9 FSRBs have an essential role in promoting the effective implementation of the FATF recommendations in their member jurisdictions. Asia-Pacific Group on Money Laundering and Eurasian Group on Combating Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism are examples of FATF associate members. Focusing on participation of international institutions in the FATF. International Monetary Fund and the World Bank play a special role in the development, promotion, and dissemination of measures for combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism and other related threats. The FATF works closely with the United Nations and the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. The Egmont Group is a united body of 166 financial intelligence units based in Toronto, Canada. Who are the observers? The decision as to whether a body may participate as an observer to the FATF is taken by the plenary. Observers have a stated role related to combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism and proliferation. Now, looking at organizational structure of the institution. The plenary. The FATF plenary consists of member jurisdictions and organizations. The plenary is the decision-making body of the FATF. Its decisions are taken by consensus. The President convenes at least 3 plenary meetings every calendar year, normally in February, June, and October. The President and a Vice President. The President is appointed by the plenary from amongst its members for a term of 2 years, non-renewable. The Vice President, also appointed for 2 years, assists the President in carrying out his or her responsibilities. The Steering Group. The FATF steering group is an advisory body and is chaired by the President. The Secretariat. The FATF Secretariat is composed of an Executive Secretary whom the plenary appoints at the proposal of the President and the Secretariat staff. The Secretariat service is provided by the OECD and the Secretariat is located at the OECD headquarters in Paris. Let's discuss the objectives or functions. To set standards of legal, regulatory and operational measures for combating money laundering, terrorist financing and other related threats to the integrity of the international financial system. To promote effective implementation of the FATF recommendations globally. To monitor countries' progress in implementing the FATF recommendations. To review money laundering and terrorist financing techniques and countermeasures. Looking at FATF's 40+9 recommendations. In 1990, the FATF issued a report containing a set of 40 recommendations to provide a comprehensive plan of action needed to fight against money laundering. In 2001, the FATF issued the 8 special recommendations to deal with the issue of terrorist financing. 3 years later, a 9th recommendation was added. Together, they are known as the 40+9 recommendations. They have been expanded to deal with new threats such as the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and to be clearer on transparency and tougher on corruption. FATF has outlined the criteria for evaluating whether its standards are achieved in participating countries. Now, let's focus on FATF's list, the blacklist and grey list. Blacklist. High-risk jurisdictions subject to a call for action have significant strategic deficiencies in their regimes to counter money laundering, terrorist financing, and financing of proliferation. This list is often externally referred to as the blacklist. The first FATF blacklist was issued in 2000 with an initial list of 15 countries. As of January 2021, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or known as North Korea, and Iran are the only 2 countries identified as high-risk jurisdictions by FATF. Consequence for blacklisted countries. Firms, organizations, and nations are called upon to apply countermeasures to protect the international financial system from the ongoing money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing risks emanating from the blacklisted country. A jurisdiction placed on the FATF blacklist often found itself under intense financial and diplomatic pressure, which has a crippling effect on the economy. The grey list. A country is placed under the FATF grey list. It means the country has committed to resolve swiftly the identified strategic deficiencies within agreed timeframes and is subject to increased monitoring. This inclusion serves as a warning to the country that it may enter the blacklist. This list is often externally referred to as the grey list. Pakistan has been on the FATF's grey list since June 2018. Consequences for grey listed countries. Problem in getting loans from IMF, World Bank, ADB and other countries. NGOs and businesses in such countries find it difficult to access funds due to strict FATF criteria, reduction in international trade, and setback to diplomatic prestige. Now, looking at the relationship between India and FATF. India became an observer at FATF in 2006. In 2010, India was taken in as the 34th country member of FATF. Recent reforms and actions undertaken by India in line with the objectives of FATF include Anti-Black Money Act 2015, Fugitive Economic Offenders Act 2018, amendments brought in the Prevention of Money Laundering Act over the years, enactment of the GST, Goods and Services Tax, New protocols to better regulate suspect transactions in banks and financial intermediaries. Demonetization of 2016. In India, the Enforcement Directorate is the nodal agency to undertake investigations under the PMLA, and FATF conducts a review of India's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing regime as part of a regular review cycle. What are the achievements of FATF? Raised international awareness towards state and institutional funding, push for non-profit organizations for more financial transparency to make sure that they do not become easier for terrorist organizations to launder money through the organizations, harmonization of legislation and enforcement efforts through effective checks and coordination against money laundering and terrorism financing, flexibility in response to new threats like use of cryptocurrencies for money laundering, adoption of the mutual evaluation process which advanced peer pressure on defaulting members. Now, looking at challenges in FATF's functioning. Nearly 2/3 of countries assessed are still not taking effective action to investigate and prosecute terrorist financing. No real power to punish states that do not comply with their standards. Fears of becoming hostage to international political rivalries. The present categorization of list, grey and black, may be too rigid to effectively address the challenges of terror financing and money laundering. The grey list has very low economic or political cost as compared to the black list, which has led to a high threshold and barrier in taking effective action. Capacity constraints of countries and inadequate operational resources and assessment complexities in the implementation of FATF standards. Following measures are suggested to make FATF more effective. There is a need for more gradations between the grey and black lists as it may increase policy options and leverage. More needs to be done in terms of regulatory enforcement mechanisms than another name and shame list. New approach of measuring effectiveness rather than technical compliance to the recommendations needed. More international cooperation is needed to strengthen FATF's operational resources and efficiency. To watch our videos in Hindi, subscribe to our Hindi YouTube channel Drishti IAS.